Technology is the most powerful change in the world of education.
Everything changes.
Welcome to the Emerging Technologies in Education podcast, delivered to you by Clever Books Company.
Dear listeners, thank you for joining Emerging Technologies in Education podcast series. And we have Russel today. Hi, Russel. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And you?
Great. Thank you very much. So my pleasure to have you on this podcast series and that you're willing to share your opinion on emerging technologies in education. The first question I'm going to ask you is to tell a little bit about yourself, what you do, and anything that you want to share.
Okay, well, I was a language teacher for about 15 years in Greece and Spain. Then I came back to England in 1999. I did a master's degree in multimedia and technology. And I then become a teacher trainer, first at the University of Westminster, working on different sort of courses in educational technology, and also at the University of Warwick. And I did about 15 years working as a principal teaching fellow at those two universities. But I also started up a website. It's called teachertrainingvideos.com. It became quite popular. It gets about 500 teachers visiting the site every day, and it basically just gives them free videos that show them how to make a podcast, or how to do screen capture, or how to use YouTube, or how to make a blog, or how to use Google Forms. It's just literally just a kind of CPD site, a site that really helps teachers to develop professionally. And on the back of that, I do lots of things. I do talks around the world. I just come back from Brazil. I do online courses. I write articles. I do consultancy work for companies, and I keep quite busy. I'm quite lucky.
Thank you for brilliant introduction. So you're quite knowledgeable about technology and the education, and you're talking to educators all the time. So can you tell me then now, how do you feel about using technology in education? Are you positive about that or negative, and why?
I suppose, obviously, overall, I have to be positive. In other words, I do think that it does offer a lot of opportunities to make learning more interesting. I think we're talking about almost two different worlds. One is the world of technology, and the other is the world of education. And they don't always link and merge well together. In education, people need more time. They need the time to learn new technologies, to understand them, to understand how they can be used in their teaching and learning, while the world of technology is moving at a super fast pace, and before anyone's had a chance to try something else has come along. So the two worlds clash in certain ways because of the speeds that they move at. But within all of the things that have evolved and have developed, there are some brilliant learning opportunities, definitely.
Thank you. That's interesting point, and that's something that I hear quite often, that education is not catching up really with how it develops in general, the world of technology, and especially the technology that is applicable currently for all the education. So teachers either don't have time, or they're lacking of the resources or information in order to catch up with everything that is going on in the world of technology. So if we go a little bit deeper in terms of like specific trends, or maybe specific resources or specific technology that you think would be beneficial for the educational process, like any technology you think, like maybe open libraries or MOOCs, or maybe 3D printing, or emerging technologies like augmented reality or virtual reality, how do you feel about them? Do you think they are really applicable for the education? And maybe you could recommend some of them that you feel would be the most beneficial for the educational sector.
Well, I think in a way you've just kind of made that point that I just made. So you're mentioning technologies that are evolving in the world of technology. So augmented reality, virtual reality. I just come back from the BET conference in London that was in January, and obviously there were lots of examples of that, but that's very cutting edge. And I think this is the problem. You know, the technology the world moves at one pace, and the educational world moves at the other. I think where there really is interest at the moment would possibly be really in the things that teachers can really get their hands around and start working with immediately, and bring them into their teaching and learning. So the technology that we're using at the moment is quite interesting, which is Zoom, which I'm obviously very familiar with, and this is great for delivering a live session in a fully online course. And I've been working with various institutions, Berlin University, for example, looking at doing very student-centered delivery of courses. So the students are actually using Zoom to teach each other rather than the teacher or the professor delivering the training. So what happens is the students are divided up into groups, and each week they're given a topic, they're given all the reading and all the information that they need, and they have to do all the background work and all the research and then present to the rest of the class. The professor simply takes like a kind of background point, listening to what they're presenting, and then fills in at the end. So if you really think about that as an example, it's about the pedagogy that makes that interesting. It's not the technology. Zoom can be used in a very traditional way. Teacher delivers a course, or Zoom could be used in a really interesting way, getting the students to actually deliver the course. So that would be an example. You could do say another example with, say, for example, screen capture. I'm a huge fan of screen capture. It's basically the technology that I use the most. Tools like Snagit or Camtasia or Screencast-O-Matic, and we can use these to record ourselves talking over PowerPoint presentations, talking over a graph, a table, talking over a picture, talking over anything basically, and turn anything that we can open onto our screen into a learning asset. And this is what's been widely used in the flipped classroom. It's been widely used in MOOCs that you just mentioned a little bit earlier. All of those types of learning contexts are making great use of screen capture technology to record PowerPoint presentations or record themselves talking over a slide or a picture or a table or a graph. Really useful. But what can even be more powerful is we put that into the hands of the students. In other words, students could, for example, record themselves doing a PowerPoint presentation in a language class, or they could record themselves describing a picture in a language lesson, or they could be a teacher trainer and they might have their lesson plan on the screen, and then they might go over their lesson plan by recording themselves talking about the lesson plan and then sending that to the teacher trainer. And again, what I've just described is an example where I've tried to think more about the pedagogy that makes the learning interesting. It's not the tool that drives the education side of things, it's the application of those tools. So what I'm really interested at the moment is getting that link together. Now, when we talk about things like augmented reality, and we talk about some of the evolving technologies that are around at the moment, and there are lots of them, 3D printing would be another one. All of these things have got a place, but they are still developing as technologies. For example, voice, Alexa, there's going to be a lot of work going on in that area, and that will come soon as well. But I'm more interested in the technologies that are already established and that we really can start to think about how we could use to really make use of them. I hope that helps a little bit.
Oh yeah, it does. It does. That's really insightful. And how do you follow all those technologies? Like, do you follow any specific resources in order to keep yourself updated on all the trends?
A little bit, yeah. I'm very lucky. I have about 25,000 teachers subscribed to my newsletter, so teachers often inform me. I'm also very lucky because I go to quite a lot of conferences, and when I go to a conference, I'll make an effort to go in and listen to other people's presentations. So, particularly, that also helps me to keep really updated. And I do scan the internet every so often, and obviously look for materials. But as I said, one thing I'm always looking for is examples of where I can see good pedagogy, well thought out ideas that are really based on the pedagogical principles of how we might learn. Rather than being kind of just, paying attention to a technology that's emerging, because really what I'm interested in is the application, the use of technologies.
Okay, thank you. So maybe you can recommend any specific conferences for the educators that are currently listening where they can go and capture all this information about the new technologies.
Obviously, that's a little bit difficult because it does tend to really depend on what country you're in. There is the BETT conference, BETT, which is a educational technology conference that I know now doesn't just exist in London. I think it originally started in London, but I think now that there are other places to go. I think that it's very difficult for me to answer that question in specifically, because I think it really just depends on sort of geographically where you are, what conferences are around. But certainly if you were ever to write into Google, educational technologist conferences, then you're likely to find that there's quite a few going on in your country. But BET certainly is a very interesting one to go to. That will really give you an idea of perhaps where things are moving in the future.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. So that is one of them that you recommend. So thank you so much for that. And one more question I have to you. Obviously, me and you, we are into the technology, and we think that education needs to be enhanced with the help of technology. But sometimes we meet people who say, I am for traditional methods of teaching. They've proven themselves for 100 years, and I'm not keen on changing or implementing anything new. How do you approach those people, and do you try to persuade them and try the technology, or you tell them, okay, stay where you are?
Well, I think at the end of the day, we've got to think about learning. That's all that really matters. Well, there are a few things that we need to think about, but certainly we need to think about learning. So, in other words, if you're in a classroom and you're a great language teacher and you've got your students using photocopies and working from their book, and maybe just using some audio files or some video, so you're not necessarily doing anything cutting edge, your students are learning really well. They're engaged in your lessons. They're motivated. They're interested in what you're doing. Well, I think that's absolutely perfect. You don't have to be using lots of technologies to be an effective teacher at all. Obviously, you might make the argument that it's a good thing to introduce technologies into teaching and learning, because obviously that's going to reflect some of the things that students might do when they come outside of their education. So they're quite likely to work in organizations where they will need to use technology. So an example would be now you're interviewing me using a technology called Zoom. Obviously, you would need some knowledge of Zoom to be able to do that. So there is an argument for saying that, it's a good idea to introduce technologies into the teaching and learning. So we make students familiar with those technologies, and those are technologies that they may end up, building up skills that they can then use when they're employed. So there is an argument, but I think you can easily overplay that argument. Because I think really at the end of the day, the most important thing is to be an effective teacher. And students already are bombarded with technology anyway. So you could almost make the opposite argument that we don't want to introduce too much technology into the teaching and learning, because of the fact that they already get lots of technology outside of the school anyway. My overall feeling is not too much technology in the classroom. I think in the class you've got the people. Of course, you're going to sometimes use technology, but you've got people, you're working together in groups, in pairs, etc. That is a great resource in itself, perhaps the most important resource. Where I think technology can be interesting is more to do with the homework. It's more to do with what students can do outside of class. It's more to do with what they could do when they're on the bus or they're on the train and they've got some spare time. And they, for example, I'm learning Polish at the moment. I've just started, and I have Quizlet on my telephone so I can revise my vocabulary when I'm on my telephone. I have YouTube videos of Polish conversations, and I can listen to those when I'm on the train or when I've got some spare time. So I'm very interested in technology outside of the class, extending the learning, offering new opportunities for students to study. I'm less interested in technology in the class, because I think in the class we already have the best resource, which is people.
Yeah, absolutely right. I totally agree with you. So my point is that technology could be a good tool to enhance what teacher offers and keep the kids motivated and use the technology outside the classroom, not only for social media or just watching something entertaining, but for their educational needs. Thank you very much for sharing your opinion. And I think it's brilliant and insightful podcast. Thank you for your time, Russel.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Everything changes.